Welcome to the Rand Swiss Weekly Wrap. This week we're going to cover news events as usual, what's happening in the Ukraine, some stuff out of China that's interesting, as well as global events and local market events in South Africa. So let's go to the big news of the week as usual. At the moment, still the Ukraine-Russia situation. No major progress. Russia continues to grind forward, still experiencing major losses of troops and equipment. There's videos coming out of the Ukraine every day, pretty much that's showing Russian equipment destroyed, what's claimed to be some Russian deaths. A number of sources are saying that the Russians have lost several thousand soldiers, including, it has been confirmed, some really senior officials, some generals have lost their lives in the Russian invasion. At the same time, we are seeing greater shelling of civilian areas by the Russians. There has been a bombing of a facility that housed children, which is obviously a tragedy. The Russians are blaming the Ukrainians are blaming the Russians. It's very difficult in the fog of war to know who did what. But it's definitely true that the Russians are losing quite a number of soldiers. They've lost definitely significant numbers of helicopters, of tanks and other vehicles. But at the same time, it's also pretty clear that their advance is continuing, even if it's slowing down. They are definitely taking over more territory in the Ukraine. The refugee crisis is continuing to be quite bad. And there has been peace talks as well ongoing between the Russians and the Ukrainians. I think there is the possibility of a deal being made, because I think there is a middle ground that would be acceptable to both. Be something around the lines of neutrality by the Ukrainians. That means they don't become a NATO country. The Russians withdraw basically to Crimea, as well as some of the eastern parts that they were going to take over anyway. The Ukrainians vow not to have nuclear weapons and American troops and that kind of stuff on their borders. The Russians take away their demand to change some of the political appointments in the Ukraine. That I think would be a reasonable level. And the Russians may also demand on the part of the Ukraine, as well as its partners, basically the Western world, some reduction in the sanctions that have been placed on them. I think that it does occur, we could probably have a deal. At the moment, the deal is not being made. The Ukrainian president has spoken in front of the US Congress, and he had brought up, for instance, Pearl Harbor, and had talked about World War III. He still wants to have the possibility of a no-fly zone over the Ukraine. That's not going to happen, because the no-fly zone basically would require the threat and possibly the actual action of shooting down Russian planes, as well as attacking ground defenses as well. That is something that would be effectively a declaration of war. So that won't be happening. That being said, there is significant support for the Ukrainian president. He's almost a cult figure or a pop figure in the West at the moment. There is I've seen a lot of celebrities, late night hosts, a lot of journalists, etc. write like Hey Geographic, very very flattering commentary on him about his bravery, etc. So he's becoming quite famous in the West. At the same time, the country is suffering. So the balance has to be maintained there. Out of the Ukraine, we have some interesting news out of China. The Chinese tech sector went through a very bad start of this week. We had double-digit drops in a number of the biggest tech companies on multiple days. We did see, for instance, Alibaba down significantly, well below its IPO price. Tencent down significantly. JD.com. We saw also Baidu down as well. Then there was a statement by the Chinese government saying that they wanted to have a stronger stock market, which reversed a lot of these drops. One of the fears around the Chinese tech sector had been that the Chinese government did not want those companies to be as strong as they were, was looking to really, hobble them, really take away their power. We've already seen what happened to Alibaba's CEO. Of course, we've also more recently had fines brought up in relation to Tencent regarding some of their actions. And the fear had been that the government was basically going to crush these companies to dust. The fact that they've come out and said they don't want these companies to basically be destroyed was seen as a positive, and we saw a massive rebound from the point the statement was made. With regards to, for instance, Alibaba, I think it jumped over 30% in a couple of days. 20+% moves from some of the other companies as well in a couple of days. So huge rebounds coming through. I don't think that the government wants these companies to be destroyed, but it doesn't also want them to be as powerful as they were a couple of years ago. With Jack Ma coming out and basically trying to pose a threat to the Chinese government, the government wants to show that they are by far the most powerful, entity in the country, and they will brook no kind of competitor at all. With regards to what they really want to happen, they probably don't want to fall too dramatically. As well, I don't think they want to have these companies basically run riot like the American companies have run riot. They would probably not mind the slight decline over time, or a moderate rise over time as well. They want it to be a quiet part of the economy, but they don't want it to be basically a dominant feature of that economy. At the same time, they don't want to destroy what is basically the only non-US tech sector in the world. China also, speaking of that country, has imposed significant lockdowns on about, I think, 100 million people or some level. There's tens of millions of people under a strict lockdown, and adding the people that are under more of a semi-lockdown, the number is about 100 million people that have been affected. This is due to a rise in COVID infections. I think the number that they're discussing is about 5,000 to 10,000 cases per day. This is likely to be Omicron. In other parts of the world, Omicron has basically blazed through. Almost no deaths have arisen from it. But in China, they have what's called a zero tolerance policy. They don't want any cases at all. And there is a case, they don't mind how many people they have to shut in to basically eradicate the case or just at least stop the spread. So that is a major impact. And if you look at the number of people, the cities it's related around and so on, it's likely that this is going to cause another blow to the global supply chain. If you look at what's happened to commodity prices, even though they've come down a little bit, oil prices, wheat prices have come down a little bit, they still are significantly higher than they were before the issues in Russia. You add on to that the stuff that's happening in China right now, with as well the pre-existing supply issues that we've seen around the world. There is a strong possibility we could see inflation rise even from here. Last, read for US inflation was 8%, just under 8%. If we see a couple % rise because of these things, we could reach 10%. And I think that's a possibility. Larry Summers, who's basically a well-known individual in the economic circles in the US, he's the dean. You'll see in the Social Network movie where the Winklevoss twins went to complain about Mark Zuckerberg. He was the dean that said no to them. He was an advisor to President Clinton. He's a very well-known figure. And he was also one of the few figures that predicted inflation like we are seeing right now, like over a year ago. He's saying that we may be seeing inflation go up another 2 to 3% from here, which would breach that 10% level. That's psychologically very important. So yes, inflation in the US is quite high. In that regard, the US Fed has come out and increased interest rates. They've increased them by about 0.25%, which was anticipated after the speech by Jerome Powell a couple of days before the announcement of the Fed increase. There had been the possibility, put out there that there'd be a 0.5% increase, but that I think had been, damaged by the Ukrainian invasion. With the uncertainty in the world, I don't think the US Fed wants to go too aggressive at the start. That being said, we are likely to see multiple rate increases over the next year and a bit. Probably 6+ increases would be something to be expected, which would bring the US interest rates up quite significantly, and probably have enough of impact on the economy to be seen. And finally, in South Africa, we had some news that Alexander Forbes basically had a piece of it bought out by an American company, Prudential. This is a interesting deal. They paid quite a significant premium for that particular share. I think it was a 14.8% share of Alex, and they're looking for to increase that up to about a third. This comes as, in South Africa, we are fearful about the current situation. It just goes to show that, what you may not be seeing at home, outsiders are more familiar with, might be able to see more clearly. The value is about R1 billion so far. If they get the third, probably goes up to about 2+ billion rands. It is a huge, impact in South Africa. If international, investors come in and try and, play a part in our economy, play a part in our financial system, especially with the kind of money, they have, it could be a quite nice little shake-up of the SA financial system. But it's something to keep an eye out. The fact that we are seeing, investors come in, look at finance, but a couple of years ago they're looking at retail. it is an interesting development in our market. And that's about it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you guys again next week. Thanks.